Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to join my friend, the Honourable MP from Charlesbourg, Haute-St. Charles, in this important debate with respect to C-83 and sentencing in Canada, Madam Speaker. And it concerns me that the government, like many things, has a comms plan, a communications plan, rather than a plan to actually lead. And this is an example. In fact, the Deputy House Leader of the Liberals is referring to a report from the Commissioner of Corrections of Canada that, of course, was just provided to the government mere minutes before a protest on Parliament Hill organized by people from the community of Tori Stafford, the young woman that was killed by Terry Lynn McClintock and her partner at the time, Madam Speaker. We've seen the comments from Rodney Stafford, her father, and the outrage with the transfer of Ms. McClintock to a healing lodge in Saskatchewan, Madam Speaker. Just in time for this protest, they have the report. But let's recall that they defended this decision, and in fact, their recent appointment of a commissioner defended the decision herself, Madam Speaker. Her decision was wrong, and it's up to ministers of the government to recognize that. I'm hoping the commissioner is watching my remarks, Madam Speaker, because I will inform her why I think their decision was wrong. Now, I haven't read her report today. I'm working off her comments after defending the decision to sort of support the government's inaction, Madam Speaker. And I'll use the government's own materials to prove my point, Madam Speaker. I learned a lot about restorative justice principles in law school at Dalhousie, Madam Speaker. And restorative justice can be used in certain circumstances. The case of Ms. McClintock is not one of those. In fact, her own family questioned whether she's of Indigenous background. But leaving that aside, Madam Speaker, the Canada's own website, the Department of Justice, says the first principle of restorative justice recognizes that, I quote, crime is fundamentally a violation of people and interpersonal relationships. Victims and the community have been harmed and are in need of restoration. It starts with a reflection of the victim, Madam Speaker. In this case, the victim, Tori Stafford, a child, lured away by Ms. McClintock and horribly killed, Madam Speaker. I don't want to get into the details. They've been recounted several times. Restorative justice starts with an examination of the victim and the crime. This is the worst crime. This is a victim and their family that have suffered the most horrendous circumstances imaginable under our criminal code, Madam Speaker. This is not a crime of poverty or of circumstance. This was a premeditated act. The vision of Ms. McClintock luring young Tori Stafford away, caught in videotape, is seared in the minds of people from that part of Ontario, Madam Speaker. The ministers involved here should review that tape, review the file. The Commissioner of Corrections should review it as well, Madam Speaker, because here is a primer. After they look at the Department of Justice's own materials on restorative justice, they should also look to the criminal code, Madam Speaker. Section 718, which outlines sentencing and the sentencing principles and purpose. This, I invite all Canadians, this is the underpinning of our justice system, Madam Speaker, particularly when it comes to a crime committed against one Canadian by another. In this case, a minor, a child, Madam Speaker. What are the principles, or what is the purpose of sentencing? These are found in Section 718 of the Criminal Code. Some of my Liberal friends are in the House, some of them are lawyers. They may think back to criminal law at law school. I refer them back there. I refer the Commissioner as well. What are the purposes of sentencing? First, denunciation. Denunciation of conduct, Madam Speaker. The killing of a child deserves the highest denunciation possible. Second, deterrence, Madam Speaker. Deterrence, the worst of crimes. Violence against other people in our civilized society, Madam Speaker. Separation of offenders is the third purpose. That is the protection of the public, Madam Speaker, which, when someone has been involved with the worst of crimes, should be a high priority. Fourth is rehabilitation. That is where you want to not give up on anyone, Madam Speaker. The fifth is reparation. to make amends to the victims and the people impacted. And the final purpose of sentencing is promotion of responsibility, Madam Speaker. Ms. McClintock is responsible for her role in the death of Tori Stafford. She should be making reparations both on a restorative level and a criminal code level for that crime. She must be separated from the public for her involvement in the worst of crimes. We must have deterrence and we must have denunciation. In the worst of crimes, Madam Speaker, those take precedent over rehabilitation. Those take precedent over transferring someone to a healing lodge, Healing Lodge is really designed for restorative justice principles for people that have committed crimes because of their circumstance in life, Madam Speaker, because of poverty, because of higher instances of incarceration of Indigenous peoples, Madam Speaker. I support healing lodges, not for child murderers. Let's continue from 718 of the Criminal Code to Section 718.1 and .2, Madam Speaker. It begins with the principle that a sentence must be proportionate to the nature of the offense, Madam Speaker. I remind you, I remind my friends, I remind the Commissioner of Corrections, this is the worst crime our society faces. The worst. There is no need for a balancing test. This is the worst. The proportionate nature of the offense means that Ms. McClintock should serve her entire sentence in a maximum security prison, in my view, Madam Speaker. Certainly the restorative healing lodge approach generally saved for Indigenous offenders should not be available for first and second degree murder cases, Madam Speaker. They should not, period. That should be a policy they should be bringing to this chamber immediately. That's what Canadians expect. There is no way under the Criminal Code, under the Justice Canada's principles of restorative justice, that you can defend the transfer of Ms. McClintock to a healing lodge. There is no way to defend it. But what's more troubling than the decision itself, Madam Speaker, and the Liberals' shell game of having a report from the commissioners show up the day that people are protesting on Parliament Hill, what is worse is this is another example of a government that is actually impotent to act. There is an org chart. The minister is at the top of their org chart, his or her department. The Prime Minister is responsible for each minister, Madam Speaker. And we see countless after countless cases where there's an inability to take action and acknowledge errors made by their department, Madam Speaker. The Statistics Canada stats grab that's going on right now that Canadians find obscene, that is when the minister responsible should say, Statistics Canada, hands off. When Veterans Affairs finds out that a convicted murderer who developed PTSD from killing a police officer in Nova Scotia, they find that Veterans Affairs funding for our veterans is being used for the murderer who never served. That's a mistake that should be rectified, Madam Speaker. The McClintock case is probably the best example of a mistake that should be rectified, Madam Speaker. There's no excuse for it. I would like the minister, I would like the Commissioner of Corrections to go through the same analysis I just did, Section 718 of the Criminal Code and the principles of restorative justice, and give me one reason why Ms. McClintock should be transferred to a healing lodge. It's time for them to step up and show some leadership, Madam Speaker, and our job in this House as the loyal opposition is to bring the concerns of Canadians to this Parliament. In fact, I applaud the Canadians that were braving the rain and cold today to bring their outrage in the transfer of Ms. McClintock to the steps of Parliament Hill. The trouble is we have a Liberal government, ministers who are impotent to act. They act like they're powerless. It's because the job and the image and the car means more to them than the actual responsibility they have, Madam Speaker. In this case, this is undermining confidence in our judicial system, in our correction system, Madam Speaker, and I've yet to see one iota of a response to why this should happen. They should take ownership, remove Ms. McClintock, and ban any further transfers of anyone who took a life to a healing lodge like this.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm disappointed in my colleague and friend across the way in the stand in which he's trying to position this in terms of politics. The question I asked earlier is, even when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister of Canada, we had dozens, multiple dozens of murderers that have in fact been transferred over to these healing lodges when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister. Sadly, Madam Speaker, and I say very sadly, because this is a case that tears at the hearts of all Canadians, we have seen a dozen or more of those murderers that were transferred to healing lodges from, in part, days in which Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, were child killers also, Madam Speaker. That is and that is true. That is true. Table. And that's the reason why the minister is doing the responsible thing. We understand the heartbreak and the horror that the family members and Canadians see in this file. And that's why we've asked the Commissioner to do the review. And the minister has that review today, Madam Speaker. My question is, would the member not at the very least recognize that the government policy needs to do the review? We're doing the review, and now we'll wait and see what actions are taken.
Member for Durham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do consider my friend across the way a friend, and I will believe him in this circumstance if he tables any name or case where someone convicted of first or second degree murder, as I said in my remarks, was transferred to a healing lodge. I don't think there are such names, Madam Speaker. If they do, I'll stand corrected. And if it happened under the Conservative government, it was wrong then, Madam Speaker. That's ownership of something. I don't believe his facts are right. There might be actually a manslaughter case where the circumstances of someone in a drinking situation gets into a fight, and if they're from circumstances of impoverished means or an Indigenous offender, that's when restorative justice can be explored. I don't think there was a case, certainly not one of someone who killed a child, Madam Speaker. I'll correct myself on the record if he tables any of these names, Madam Speaker. But as I said, it's beside the point, really. When Canadians, especially the family of someone impacted, bring this to the attention of the chamber, it's our priority to fix it. It happened when Stephen Harper did find out about the child killer Clifford Olson receiving old age security, OAS, Madam Speaker. The Conservative government took the time to pass a bill to change the law to stop that, Madam Speaker. That was when something happened under our watch that was inappropriate, that was undermining public confidence. We stood up, agreed, and changed it. That's what I want them to do.
Questions and comments? The honourable for the honourable. Hold on here. The honourable. Sorry, just one quick second here. So the Honourable Minister of Status of Women has a point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am tabling the government's responses to order paper questions number 1895 to 1911.
Thank you. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Guelph.
Madam Speaker, it seems that the opposition is bent on making this as political as possible, when in fact this is something that Corrections Canada has under consideration. My previous question about healing lodges was answered in a way that wasn't accurate, Madam Speaker. Of the 9 healing lodges that we have in Canada, 2 accept medium security inmates. This is one of the 2 that we're discussing today. Corrections Canada worked within the guidelines they were given. Our minister has asked, first of all, how the decisions were made, and second of all, whether the process is correct. And that's the report that the minister has now, that he will be considering and bringing back to the House. So apart from the grandstanding that's going on, I was really hoping to discuss the budget today. I have a speech on the budget. The budget's a very important document before our House, and instead of doing that, we're interrupting our discussions on the budget to get into something that really is being considered and will be coming back to the House in due time. So back to the honourable member, we are looking at a medium security facility, transfer between 2 medium security facilities. Maybe he could comment on that.
allow the member to respond. The honourable member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry to inform the member from Guelph that some politics happens in this chamber. I get a kick out of the fact that whenever we say something that's uncomfortable to the Liberals, we're being partisan. Yes, that is indeed our role, Madam Speaker. He wants to speak not on the budget, on the 850-page Budget Implementation Act that his party screamed about if we ever had budgets that big, Madam Speaker. He'll get his time. But I invite him, through you, Madam Speaker, I'll come to Guelph next week or in the week after and talk in the coffee shops about what they think about the McClintock case. In fact, I was very clear in my remarks. No murderers, first or second degree, at a healing lodge. That should be the policy.